Being a caregiver has many challenges, and one of them is balancing work, finances, and taking care of your loved ones. Thanks to New Jersey's Family Leave Insurance, balancing your life has become easier. Join us to learn more. Hello and welcome to Aging Insights. I'm Kathy Rowe, Executive Director of New Jersey Advocates for Aging Well, and today I have two guests to talk to us about one of New Jersey's best-kept secrets, the Family Leave Insurance Program. We have Yara Willman-Cole from New Jersey Citizen Action and Dr. Becky Logue-Conroy from the Center for Work and Women at Rutgers. I want to welcome you both here today because I know how difficult it can be caring for a loved one, caring for yourself and your family, the work, the bills. It really can be overwhelming for people. And people need to make hard choices between what they do, what they can do, their caregiving demands. But the Family Leave Insurance Program can make a huge difference. So let's begin exploring this really important program. Yara, what can you describe for us what the New Jersey Paid Leave benefit is and what it can be used for?
Yes, thanks, Kathy. So paid family leave in New Jersey, as you already described, is called Family Leave Insurance, or FLI for short. And it's a program that's actually been around for 15 years in New Jersey. And it provides partial wage replacement when you take leave to care for a loved one, bond with a new child, or if you need to take time for reasons related to domestic violence or caring for someone for reasons related to domestic violence or sexual assault as well. But the benefit is really available for folks who are working so that they can make a decision about what is in their best interest and their loved one's best interest, so that they have a choice, whether they take some time off and use the benefit for 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks in a 12-month period. It's really up to them. It's available every 12-month period for 12 weeks, 12 consecutive weeks. If you do take it less than the 12 consecutive weeks, it reduces to 8 weeks in a 12-month period if you take it intermittently.
So if
That's
you took like 2 weeks here and then you could take 6 weeks later on, but it wouldn't add up to 12 weeks. 12 weeks if it's straight through.
Yeah, and then some more details. So when I say partial wage replacement, it replaces your wages 85% of your average wage with a cap of $1,055 a week, which is for this year, 2024. It does adjust every year. The cap adjusts every year.
Good.
It'll go up depending on sort of the calculation of how they come up with that amount. So we'll see what it is for next year towards the end of the year. But for now, it's $1,055 a week, and it's 85% of your average wage. So that's sort of the overview of the benefit.
That is great. And so who is eligible for the program? And to take leave to care for a loved one, does it have to be a specific relative, like a parent or a child? Who can be the caregiver, and what does it entail?
A couple things. First of all, it's important to just note that most workers are actually eligible for the benefit. There's a few exemptions. I'll tell you first who's exempted. It's federal workers. It's workers that are actually independent contractors. So they're not actually employees. And also folks that are working for like a religious employer are typically exempt from this benefit. But otherwise, most folks are covered. They just have to reach minimum earnings eligibility qualifications for the benefit. So you have to have earned $14,200 in about a year and a half before you take leave. And that could be with any employer in New Jersey, not just the one that you're currently taking leave from. It's sort of a portable benefit in that sense. And then you also could reach that amount by working 20 weeks, earning a minimum amount in those 20 weeks. We can put the graphic on the screen for your viewers so they can see that, so they can see the eligibility for that. But there's very few exemptions. Like most folks are surprised to learn that the majority of workers are in fact eligible.
Wow, no, that is great to know, and I think that so many people just aren't aware of it. So, Becky, we know that often it's women who are caregivers, and family leave can help women with their own economic situation, their well-being, their financial security. So how does paid leave also help men take leave as caregivers?
Sure. So I just want to say a few things about how paid leave insurance helps, or family leave insurance helps women. So often women are caregivers, like you said. And so family leave insurance allows them to take some time out of the workforce but still continue to get paid so that they don't take a financial hit for taking that leave, which often happens when they take an unpaid leave or leave the workforce altogether. And one of the issues with leaving the workforce altogether, as we know, is that then you stop paying into things like Social Security, like your retirement accounts. So if you take an extended absence out of the workforce, you're losing the accumulation of those benefits, that money.
So it's not just the time that you're taking off. It really affects you in the long run.
Yes. And so leaving the workforce altogether, is a problem in that sense. But if you take your leave, take 6 weeks, take 8 weeks, take 12 weeks, women are often caregivers, and so they're the ones who often take that time. They can leave the workforce, take that leave, get paid at the 85% wage replacement, and then return to their job so that they can continue paying into those benefits and that they can continue to care for their families and to be financially stable.
Right.
And the thing that I would say about men is that it works in two ways. It helps men, but it also helps women. Often, women are the ones who take leave, so employers may see them as the ones who are caregivers and so may treat them that way, even if they don't do it consciously, right? So they might not give someone a promotion. They might decide not to give benefits to someone who took 6 or 8 weeks, not benefits, a promotion or a bonus. To someone who took 6 or 8 weeks. They may say that person was gone for part of the time, so they don't deserve this benefit. Whereas they see men as this sort of ideal worker norm, the person who is dedicated to their job and may have a family at home, but aren't the primary caregiver. But something like family leave insurance that is gender neutral gives both men and women the access to this 12 weeks. And the more that men take it, the less that women would be seen as the primary caregiver and therefore may actually end up closing some of that gendered wage gap because employers may not see workers in these gendered ways anymore.
So by using it and expanding it, it can help break down these stereotypes that we're still fighting to overcome. I remember when I was first working, there was the company I worked for had paternity leave, and one of the really nice guys on the team, his wife had a baby, and he didn't take it because he didn't want to be looked down on, like, what if I don't get a raise later on because I took off 2 weeks for paternity leave. And that was a long time ago, but we're still fighting these stereotypes and these issues. So,
and many of us have elderly parents, aging parents, people that we want to be able to take care of, and we have siblings. And if there's a way for us to divide that care or divide that caregiving across generations or across siblings, something like that, where like if you have 3 siblings who live in New Jersey and are able to take family leave insurance, you may be able to add some number of weeks together that a brother and 2 sisters or 2 brothers and 2 sisters or 3 brothers could take to care for an aging parent. And if we encourage more men to take leave, they're more likely to do that care for their own parents. Whereas I think historically, women have even cared for their in-laws. So this gives people the opportunity to spread that care across men, women, whoever needs to take.
And I'll just add that one important detail of the program is that you can take the leave to care for any loved one. You get to define who is a loved one, somebody who is close enough to be considered family, but it actually may be your neighbor. So if you don't have siblings and you do want to get some help caring for your aging parents, you don't even have to divide it among your blood relatives. You could actually look to other folks in the space that your aging parent or any loved one relies on support. So it could be a neighbor that you're close with that relies on you for support. Especially as folks age and live longer, they need to have more options for who they can rely on to where they can seek that support from.
And we have such a shortage of home care workers, home health aides, which even if you can find one, it can be very expensive for people. So what you're saying is, from the patient perspective, you could have like 12 weeks of your daughter and then 12 weeks of your son and maybe a neighbor. So throughout the year, you could have coverage for all your needs, and not if you can't pay for or find a home care worker.
Yeah, I mean, the one detail I do want to add also is that for receiving family leave insurance, the benefit for caregiving, you do have to have medical certification in the application. So that means essentially that, the doctor overseeing the care for the individual has to provide some sort of condition or diagnosis usually.
All right.
It doesn't necessarily have to be an acute situation like recovering from, surgery. That of course does count, but it could be just something that is saying, oh, this individual does need some caregiving. So it just sort of really relies at that point on the healthcare provider, and there does need to be some education with healthcare providers in terms of how they can certify claims for individuals depending on what they're going through, what their needs are. It doesn't mean that we've had situations where healthcare providers, said that they couldn't certify a situation because the individual was in a hospital and was receiving the care that they needed. That's not the case, obviously. As you know, even just caring for someone as a family member who's going through surgery and in the hospital in their recovery, they still need someone to help manage the care for that. So that, that healthcare provider may need a little bit of education and support to know what they can actually certify the family leave benefit for.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point.
I want to just add one more thing. I think one of the benefits of having this expanded definition of family is you start to create these communities of care, because sometimes your blood relatives live far away.
Yeah.
Many people don't work or live in the place they grew up, even if their families remain there. So this is a way to expand your own community of care, to care for each other in a way that you may not be able to do without this expanded definition of family. So I think that is one of the special things about New Jersey's family leave insurance program, is that we do have this expanded definition of family, such that you can use your community as your caregivers, again, as long as you're certified by a medical provider that the care is needed. But that really is something special, I think, about that definition of family, chosen family.
The broad definition, chosen family, yes, is especially important. But just the idea that as long as you have access to the healthcare provider, you're close enough to that individual that you are there and you understand what they're going through, and you're speaking with their healthcare provider and able to get that certification. That's sort of the benchmark that you have to meet in terms of the being considered a loved one of that individual.
Okay. So, if someone finds themselves in this position, what do you suggest? Like, what's the first steps? How do they bring this up with their employer?
I mean, it depends, right? Because everyone is in a different employment situation. I mean, often we recommend that you just start to ask some questions. If you have an HR department, if you have, a manager, then just start to begin to ask, like, what is available to me? What are my options? But understand that often HR and employers may not even be aware themselves. And so, taking the first step to see what's available, and then also being able to provide information to your HR, to your employer about this program, and letting them know that it's of no cost to the employer. So all they have to do is essentially cover your work while you're out on leave. You may have to request a leave of absence from the employer, from HR, and that's essentially the job security or job protection that is in the jurisdiction of the employer to approve. And we can talk about sort of the eligibility for that. It does get a little more complicated, so I don't want to confuse folks, but that is essentially what the employer has to approve or not. But in terms of the benefit itself, because it's a state program, it's funded through the family leave insurance is only funded through employee payroll taxes. You don't have to get your employer to approve it. The benefit itself, the payment, you apply to the state for those benefits. And you do have to inform your employer about your need to take leave, what your plans are, what your approximate kind of timeline of how long you
so they
expect
can
to be
plan
out.
to cover you, right?
And yes, and your employer may also have you fill out some paperwork, kind of also requesting the medical certification, so that they are, doing their due diligence and collecting the information that the law does require them. And when I say the law, I'm referring specifically to the job protection laws for the employer. And just hoping that you have some backup if you do face an employer that is challenging. Like we are able to kind of connect you with resources for groups that can help you in case you feel scared, because sometimes people are afraid to actually ask for this time off, and you feel very alone and isolated. If
Especially
you don't have
if no
that
one's
support.
done it before.
If no one's done it.
Right. And like you said, HR might not even know about it. So let's put up on the screen where you can get more information for human resources or your employer, so that if there's a question, here's where you can call and get information to share with them. But I want to detour a little bit, and can we talk about the difference between family leave and this paid family leave? Because there are job protections for taking family leave. And this is different because you have the paid insurance. So can you Let's talk about the difference between the two and the overlap of the two.
Yeah, I'll start off. Becky, you can chime in because I do want to just acknowledge it is confusing, and this is where we get a lot of misunderstanding.
And I think people are familiar with family leave, right? They've heard of that.
Well, usually it's FMLA,
Yeah.
which is the Federal Family Medical Leave Act, and that's now 30 years old. I'm guessing, but it's been around for a number of decades, and it's a national federal law, and it's basically what protects your job across the states. And you do have to have 50 employees. You have to work at your job a year, and you have to earn 1,250 hours. You have to work 1,250 hours, so that is going to protect your job for not only your own health, but also to care for a loved one or bond with a new child.
Okay.
And then we also have the New Jersey Family Leave. It's called the Family Leave Act, the FLA, which very closely similarly sounding to the FLI, but it's just your job protection, not your paid leave benefit.
Okay.
Similar eligibility criteria in that you have to have worked a year and you have to have earned 1,000 hours for that job protection, and you have to be an employer with 30 or more employees. And that only protects your job specifically for caregiving or bonding, not for your own health. So, it's and I'm going to put a chart up so you can see the distinction between those. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's important about that is that people understand they're taking leave, but they don't necessarily understand that their wage replacement is separate from their job protection.
Okay.
And that while most workers are covered for family leave insurance, the wage replacement that Yara spoke about earlier, she talked about the eligibility. The eligibility for job protection is different.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we found at the Center for Women in Work is that there are some number of people, around 27% of workers, who are still not covered by job protection, even though they may be eligible for the wage replacement. So they may be scared to take that leave that they're eligible for, that they've paid into, because their job may not be protected. And we find that the people who are more often not protected are women.
Okay.
People who make lower incomes, younger workers, and workers in care professions, food-related professions like fast food, things like that.
Right.
So home health aides, those kinds of professions that are often the most vulnerable. And the reason that those people are not often protected is because they may change their job in a year, so they may work for more than one employer across the course of a year, and you have to have worked for the same employer for the full year.
Right.
Or they may not have worked 1,000 hours, or they may work for an employer with 30 or with fewer than 30 employees. So those are all the reasons that someone might not be protected. And we just find that sometimes the people who are not protected are often the most vulnerable and who may be the most fearful that they'll lose their job or that they won't get a promotion if they take leave. And so that's kind of the issue, is that they're paying into this insurance program. They're eligible for it. It is their benefit. But there is the added fear that they may lose their job when they take this leave.
Fear and confusion. Right. Because everything we just said is so complicated.
It is complicated.
And one of the aims, that we are trying to do is simplify this so that it is something that is more accessible and equitable, so that there aren't these barriers. So that's something that we all work on. Yeah.
And it just sounds strange to think of that people who are professional caretakers are the ones most at risk of not being protected for taking care of someone else. That just shouldn't be that way. So again, where the fear comes from, being fired, not having your job when you come back. It sounds like if employers knew more about it, and maybe that's from more people taking advantage of this, it becomes more common knowledge, and that would relieve some of that fear. What are other things that we can do to let people know about it and promote this program, get the word out?
Yeah, I mean, we work with a lot of different types of groups and organizations to train them. We do trainings that are kind of train the trainers, so that we enable and empower individuals that maybe serve the public. These are social workers, doulas, community health workers, those types of intermediaries, so that they understand, what is available, so they can educate their clients, because the improvement in health and well-being outcomes is there. There's so much research to show that there is a lot of interest for like public health workers and those folks to understand why they should be sharing this information with their folks, and not just let HR or employers be the only source of this information. It really is up to a wide range of folks to take this information on, and so we help do that training and education, and the Center for Women at Work has some really good resources as well.
Right, and we know that the research shows that people trust their caregivers or trust their healthcare workers, like social workers.
Yeah.
If you have, a family member who's sick or who has to be out for 6 weeks or 8 weeks or something because of surgery or some major medical incident, you trust your social workers, you trust nurses, you trust the doctors. Those are the people that we're trying to help inform so that they know how to speak to the family members of their patients or their clients to say, hey, mom, you could take leave for this, or hey, child of this person, who's taking care of your father or grandfather or mother or grandmother, you have the opportunity to take this leave. And if a social worker knows more about it, if home health aides know more about it, if nurses and doctors know more about it, they're better able to inform their client or patient's family that, this seems like the kind of thing that someone really needs a caregiver. So let's, why don't you call the state or try or look into family leave insurance? They're not ever going to be the people who are going to walk someone through applying for it or anything like that, but just the knowledge to know, like, hey, do you know this is available? Do you know that there's an opportunity for you to take it? And inform people of their benefit and of those options so that people are getting that from a trusted source. Sometimes if people are afraid to talk to HR or if HR is not as knowledgeable, it's good when all of those healthcare workers or all of the people who may be intermediaries, those who are, between the patient and, and their care so that they can learn about it.
Yeah, no, that's important. And as we look at more age-friendly health systems, we talk about what matters and how to help people maintain their independence. And I think that's really important to have the health care providers on board, because it's not just the patient that's in front of them who may have had the surgery or the fall or whatever. It's the entire family is really the patient. Their caregiving circle is their patient. So we need to get the word out about that. So if someone decides that they have the need for this, can you walk us through the process? So, I need to take off to take care of my mother who had surgery, and what do I do? What are my first steps?
Start to gather resources and information. We can put up some of the websites. We really recommend the state's website. And we also have a website with information, and we also have a referral line if folks have questions and they are not able to really get the answers to what they're asking online. But start to gain some information and gather some resources. Talk to colleagues at your place where you work, see if anyone has gone through it or is aware. That's always an option. But if you work for a smaller employer, if nobody in your place where you work has gone through it,
you could be the first.
You could be the first, yes. And as I said before, it is good to, of course, ask your employer, get some information from HR, see what they know, and then also let them know what you're going through. Share what the need that you have is about, because actually they do, under the law, have an obligation to tell you what your rights are, at least in terms of, letting you know that this benefit exists. Oftentimes they don't know that it exists, so we do have to educate our employers as well. And then actually just decide what you need. Like, lay out your timeline. Figure out what the medical care provider is saying is likely recovery time, or the time that they need some caregiving for. And some people decide that they want to take 3 weeks and then they want to go back to work and just take maybe a day here, a day there, depending on, what. Just
and that
depends.
can add up to 8 weeks,
It can add up to 8 weeks when you do it intermittently, 56 days. And then you go to the Department of Labor's website. It's mileybenefits.nj.gov. I said it really quick, but you'll see it on I'm sure we're going to put the website on. And you apply there. You can start an application early, but you can also just go in and apply for the benefit once you're out on leave. You're not getting paid from your employer. And you have the kind of idea from the medical provider what they will certify for. So they have agreed to your kind of timeline that you've set out.
Yeah.
Keeping a notebook with all these like dates and details, I think, is always a good thing to do as well. And then you go on and you apply for the benefit. And, you know, we do see there are some delays in claims being processed. The intermittent processing is not a streamlined process at all. It's the system that the Department of Labor is using for their claims processing was built in the 80s. They have not modernized it. So being aware that that could happen and preparing for that as best you can. Obviously, that's the big issue that we do need to tackle in terms of government and the ability to
making
do
it
this
work
smoother. Our understanding is they are going to be modernizing and improving the program soon. So we're advocating to help, you know, the Department of Labor, you know, keep accountable to that timeline. But in the meantime, you know, you go on, you apply for your benefit, and then, you know, you hopefully will see a turnaround in, you know, 3 or 4 weeks and get your money, and you get it on a card that is mailed to you. You can transfer your balance to your own bank account, and then you'll have the funds available to you if all goes smoothly, you know, within a few weeks of applying.
Great. So Becky, can you close us out with talking about the challenges with accessing paid family leave and what the Center for Women in Work has found in your recent fact sheet and research about this?
Sure. I think some of the issues with access have to do with confusion, like we've talked about so far, the confusion between the wage replacement and the job protection. So our newest fact sheet is about the job protection, is about the gaps that occur when people are not protected. So I talked about that a little earlier. You know, we find that almost 30% of workers are not eligible for may not be eligible for job protection, even if they're eligible potentially for the wage replacement. So I think a lot of the issue with access is confusion. But I also think, like Yara was just talking about, when you're applying and thinking about and getting information, I think the other issue with access is sometimes things happen in an acute situation, right? Somebody needs surgery quickly. This is not the same as preparing for a baby to come.
Right, you don't have any warning.
Right, so some things happen where you don't have warning, where a child gets in an accident, or you get, sadly, a cancer diagnosis or something like that, where suddenly you are looking at surgery and 6 weeks or 8 weeks out where you have to care for somebody. So one of the things that I think is also a barrier to access is just the knowledge, right? So hopefully this show will help people to understand that building your own knowledge is preparing for the future. Knowing that at some point you may have to care for someone, whether that's your own child, whether that's your neighbor who you consider family, whether that's your parent or grandparent, we are all caregivers. And so knowing ahead of time that this is available to you, so looking at your paycheck and seeing that you're paying into New Jersey's family leave insurance and noticing that on your pay stub, understanding your employer's leave policies inside their employer and how that coincides with the New Jersey family leave insurance. All of those kinds of things I think are barriers to access, and I think people can work on their knowledge, but also closing the gaps between job protection and eligibility for wage replacement is also really important.
Well, thank you both. This is very informative, and we are going to be talking about this a lot more. Thank you for joining us today on Aging Insights. For information about family leave insurance, you can watch this and previous episodes of Aging Insights on our website, on YouTube, or listen to them as podcasts. To find resources for older adults and their caregivers in New Jersey, please go to our website at njaaw.org.